Hello, and welcome to the What If I Fail podcast with me, your host, Alex Cowart. Today, I want to talk to you about pivots and evolutions, and very specifically, that moment that you should take a breath when you want to burn it down. Now, this is a feeling I see happen a lot. I've been through it myself, I've seen friends go through it, and I see a lot of clients go through it, to the point where we have a little joke in my membership about the Phoenix permission slips. Can I have a permission slip to go full Phoenix and burn it to the ground so I can rise from the ashes? Obviously, the answer is normally no. But this feeling, this desire to burn it to the ground, like that comes up so often for so many people. And I want to talk about why, and I want to talk about what we can do when this feeling does come up, because it will, it's inevitable. It will come up multiple times in your business journey. You have to be able to recognize it for what it is, and you have to be able to deal with it without crashing and burning, frankly. So this feeling, this I want to burn it down moment, comes normally at times of real frustration. So there's this moment where things just stop working. They don't work the way they used to. Everything feels clunky and heavy. And often at the same time, we feel like we're dropping balls. So maybe we forgot something for a client, or we meant to follow something up and we didn't, or we missed a deadline and as a result, something went wrong. These are little mistakes, but they feel like they're aggregating. They feel like they're compounding and they're building, and they start to feel, although they're small mistakes, they start to feel much bigger. And when these little mistakes happen alongside business being harder, so maybe sales are harder and it's harder to pull new clients in, having you then make mistakes with clients that you've already got makes you feel like you are messing up, and that maybe you're just not cut out for this. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you wish you had an easier life, right? The number of times with clients I've worked through that feeling of wishing that they had a job and they could just go and work for someone else, and they would have a steady income and someone would give them the work to do, and they could just concentrate on their job and not have to worry about everything else. These moments, this isn't something that just happens out of nowhere. It's something that builds, and the reaction comes normally after it's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's never out of the blue, but it is normally such a small thing that tips you over the edge and makes you just want to retreat and hide and get away from it all. And so the first thing I want you to do if you reach this moment is actually the universal IT reset, right? We want to turn it off and turn it back on again. This is something they use in healthcare. This is something that they use obviously in IT. This reset moment is so important, and it's such a good facility that we have, right? Such a good option for us to just take a beat, take a moment, take a breath. So when I'm talking about switch it on, switch it off, I'm not talking about your business. I'm talking about your brain. If you're in this high level, emotional, high frustration feeling, then you're not thinking clearly. So we need to switch your brain off, and we need to get you out of the situation. We need to create some space, because without space, you can't have perspective. And perspective is absolutely what we need here. We need to be able to look at this and say clearly what is and isn't going on, where we can pick things up, what we need to do about it. And when you're in that high stress moment and you've got a lot of emotions running through, you can't think clearly, you can't make good logical decisions at that point. There's too much friction. And so we need to hit stop, right? So we need to get you out of the situation, whether that's for a day, whether that's for the rest of the day, however much of a break you can create, make it a really clean break. put everything down, step away, turn everything off. It's unlikely that there is deadlines that are so desperate for you to hit that day that if you don't do work in that moment, everything's going to go to shit, right? So you can just stop. And I recommend, like turn everything off, close everything down, put an out of office on if that feels professional to you, but you don't have to. Get yourself out of the house. Go and do something fun, ideally. We want you to be doing something that occupies your brain so that you're not simply stewing on the same problem in a new environment, right? We want to really get you away from the entire situation. We want you thinking about something completely different. We want you to have some fun again, right? We want you to remember that everything's not bad so that you can regulate and overcome that misery, the friction is hard. It creates these moments of imposter syndrome. It creates that feeling of like, am I actually any good at this? Maybe I'm a failure. Maybe I'm a fuck up, right? We need to get you out of that mindset. To do that, doing something fun is a really good way of achieving that. You could do some exercise. You could get out in nature. You could go and play with your kids or your dog or your cat. You could go and do something creative. Do something that occupies your brain, that takes you away from work and doesn't allow you to stew on what is going on in your business. Have the rest, have the recuperation. You need that rest and recuperation. It is so important. It's an essential part of the process, is having that reset moment. Once you've had the reset moment and you come back, so we've switched off, we're going to switch back on again. But we're not just diving straight in to the point at which we were before. We're taking that step back, we're maintaining that distance a little bit, and we're asking ourselves, okay, what is really going on here? What's actually happening? And really, what's the word I'm looking for? Dispassionately, really kind of very much with a separation, very much with this objective mindset. We want to look at each thing that's happening. So look at mistakes that are made and really actually frame those mistakes. Why are those mistakes being made? Have we made those mistakes before? If it's the same mistake that you've made over and over and over and over and over again, then yeah, maybe you're no good at that particular job. But it's highly unlikely that you've made that mistake before. Which means that you've done that piece of work, you've done that process, you've done that thing multiple times in the past and not got it wrong. So what was different this time? Generally, what's different is the overwhelm. There's too much going on. You're busy, you're rushing, you're trying to crack things out as quickly as possible because you feel overwhelmed and you feel like you need to just do as much as possible as quickly as possible. That doesn't mean that you're no good at this. That doesn't mean that you're a fuck up. That doesn't mean that you aren't worthy of having a business. That means that the situation got out of hand and you made a mistake. And that's okay, because mistakes can be fixed. Nothing is so irreparable that it is going to require you to turn the entire business off. So if the mistakes are being made because of the situation, not because of yourself, burning it all to the ground isn't going to help anything, right? Because it's not about you. It's not about your ability or your worthiness. So then we need to look at it and say, okay, well, what else is going on here? Where else is there stress? Where else is there worry? Where else is there, what is creating all of this friction within the business? What isn't working? Where are we in comparison to where we want it to be? And if we are behind, if we feel behind, why? What's going on there? Now, in general, a lot of the time is the problem, right? It's capacity. Capacity tends to be the biggest cause of all of these frictions because we feel like we have too much to do and not enough time. Now, if you work with me, if you're one of my clients, then that's great. We've got a really easy fix there because I am all about setting priorities and being really focused on just the things that are absolutely essential rather than being busy. We want to be productive. We don't need to be busy. We want to look at things we can delegate out. We want to look at things that we can say, I don't need to look at you for at least another quarter. I can drop you, I can put you aside. I can get rid of this task entirely, right? We look at efficiencies. We look at making sure that we're doing the right things for the right reasons and not spreading ourselves so thin that we can't keep up with everything. If you're not a client, maybe you should be. But then we come to this question. And this question, should I pivot? Should I evolve? What am I doing next? Right? These are, I wouldn't say I often have people coming to me asking, is this a pivot or an evolution? Most of the time, what happens is there is an overreaction. There's a knee-jerk reaction. So if they're not burning it to the ground, they tend to be pivoting pretty quickly. It's I've been trying this and it's not working, so I'm going to immediately try something else. Right? We're here, we've tried, nothing's worked quickly enough, so I'm going all the way over here. I'm leaving this behind and I'm changing everything entirely. And the trouble with this switching of directions, especially if you do it too often, is that this is where, and this is something we talked about in the episode about the trust recession, this is where we create that mistrust. We create that inconsistency in what we're talking about and how we're talking about it, that means that our audience just gets a bit confused. Oh, I thought she did that. When did she? Okay, now we do this. Or, well, I'm not really sure. We get to the point where people can't refer us because they're not sure what we're doing that week. They get to the point where, people aren't coming to us and saying, can you do this? Because they don't want to offend us if it's something that's, oh, that's so January. Oh, that's such a January me thing to say. No, this is March me, I'm very different. It creates this lack of trust and it removes all of the options. We want to create that consistency. We want to have that same thread that binds everything together, that allows us to be multi-passionate, allows us to have lots of different ways of working with us, lots of different facets of what we do, but has that uniting thread so that people feel really certain that they know what we deliver so that they can have trust to come to us. So if we're just pivoting and we're losing that thread, we're not taking people on the ride with us, then we're going to have a harder time in business. And it's a compounding problem, right? Because then the more times you pivot, then that new thing that you've pivoted to, that's not going to take off either. And if you never give anything enough time to actually take, then you're just going to run into the same problem again and again and again and again. So this is something this whole podcast came out of the pivot and evolution discussion. I was having a conversation with my coach at the time. This is last year. And I felt that I had pivoted too much. I felt that I, every 6 months, changed direction. One minute I was doing corporate work, the next minute I was working with entrepreneurs, then I was doing leadership, then I was working with agency owners, then I was working with, solopreneurs, and then I went back to, and it felt like I was switching and changing so often. I felt like this was my problem. This is what I diagnosed myself with, right? I've changed too many times. No one knows what I do consistently enough to be able to come to me for it. And I was beating myself up quite a lot about this. I think at one point I wrote a blog post that compared myself to a ballerina that had just switched times, going round and round and round and round in circles. And firstly, I was beating myself up about it. I was telling myself that I wasn't worthy. I wasn't, this was a bad thing. I was a terrible business owner. But also I could no longer find the thread, right? I'd made myself a bit dizzy. I couldn't find the thread that combined it all. And working through this with my coach, we looked at it, we went through, and the thread was there. The thread combined all of it. And her point to me was this isn't a bunch of pivots. This is an evolution of your work. This is a deepening. This is an expansion. And so that, for me, that kind of moment where it was I don't need to make a decision right now that I stick with forever. Because this is the thing I was really struggling with. I'd pivoted in my mind, I'd pivoted so many times that it felt like the next time needed to be the last time. It needed to be the final moment. I was like, I can't do this again. I can't keep doing this again. At the time, I'd been in business for 5 years. It's now been 6 years. I felt that it was time I really settled on that one thing. It was time I really decided upon it, and I had the foundations and I could really fly with it. And I needed to make the decision. And it was the decision paralysis that had kept me so stuck. It was the fear of making a decision because it felt like it had to be the final decision, the big decision. I couldn't make it. I couldn't decide upon it. And I kept on saying to her, but what should I do? What should I do? And I just wanted someone else to say, here's the right answer. Go and do this. This is super lucrative and it will make you loads of money and you'll have so much fun and you'll enjoy it and it'll be great. There's the decision you're looking for. And actually what came out of it was that I didn't need to make a final decision. I kept on, because I had been evolving, evolution is a good thing. We look at pivoting as a bad thing if you're chopping and changing too often, but we look at evolution as a great thing. We applaud people who have evolved, who have deepened, who have done better. In a career, a more sort of standard corporate career, you would expect someone to evolve, right? You would start at the bottom of the corporate ladder and you would work your way up. You would evolve, you would do greater learning, you would take on new responsibilities, you would learn new areas, and that would be an evolution of your work. And so actually, we applaud that within others, but I couldn't see it for myself in my own journey. And it took my coach saying to me, this has been an evolution and that's a good thing. You've evolved, you've found new interests, you've done all the reading. I've got the massive shelf of books behind me that's leadership focused, that is personal development, that is business development, that's philosophy, and all the sorts of non-fiction books that I adore. This was all part of my evolution. And in being able to accept that I had previously been evolving, it allowed me to accept that I would continue to evolve. And continuing to evolve meant that I didn't need to make a final decision that could never change, that I could never change my mind ever again. It simply meant that I needed to choose what was right for right now. And I went to my girlfriends, I went to the group chat and I told them all about my day and what we'd realised and how it felt like a huge weight had come off my chest, and I suddenly felt like I could do things again. I could take action. I could finally take action. I was out of this stuck mode. And the group chat, full of coaches, obviously, said to me, great, what are you going to do? What action are you going to take? How are you going to really ground in this breakthrough and make it real by doing something? What are you going to do? And I think I talked about this in episode 1 of season 1, in fact. The answer was I'd always wanted a podcast. I'd always wanted to have a podcast. I'd always wanted to have that kind of, I guess, like recollection of my evolution, the documentation of my evolution, of what I think, the way of speaking. I find that videos, it's a great way for people to understand me. I struggle, as you might have understood, you might have seen, I struggle to keep things into short, pithy little sentences. I love a metaphor, I love an expansion, I love a story. And so podcasting for me was a great way to communicate in a way that felt really natural to me. But I didn't have a strategy, right? I'd always wanted one, but I'd never sat down and worked out where the strategy would be. Now, partly that was because I needed to make the final decision first. And then once I knew, then I could build the ecosystem. Once I had the ecosystem and the pillars and the messaging, then everything would slot in really beautifully. And then I would be able to create a podcast that made sense along everything else. And they completely kiboshed that. They said, no, you're completely wrong. You just need to take action, right? You just need to document the process as you go along, document the evolution. And so they'd said, no, just take action, set the podcast up. And I remember saying to them, but I don't even have a name for the podcast. And I think, they said, well, document exactly, make the podcast name. I'm known in my circle for Ron Seal names. It does what it says on the tin. I said, make it a Ron Seal name. And I was like, oh, what am I going to call it? Watch me fuck up a podcast. And they laughed, obviously, and they said, well, you could. There's no reason why you couldn't. And I think it was my friend Melissa who said, call it What If I Fail? And I did. And this is where we are. And it's worked beautifully. Season 1, gosh, if you listen back to season 1, for any of you that have, fair play to you, it's all over the place. There's no trajectory through the season. Each episode is very much whatever was on my mind at that moment in time. It's a bit, here, there, and everywhere. There's no real tying thread through it. But it was about experimentation for me. It was about learning. It was about seeing whether or not I liked it. And it was a part of my evolution. It was a part of my growth. It was a part of working things out for myself. And I don't regret it even slightly. And so if we're kind of tying this back to, is it a pivot or is it an evolution? For me, a pivot is this complete change of direction. It's a new niche, it's a new offer, it's a new platform. It's something entirely new that feels like a complete break from what had been built previously. It's kind of a really soft, we've burned it to the ground and we're going again. Whereas an evolution is an increase in capacity. It is a deepening. It is maybe a strengthening of boundaries. Maybe it's about systems and standards and processes. Maybe it's about reaching a new level of audience. For me, I previously worked with a lot more beginners. I don't work with beginners anymore. I work with people who are already successful, who've already had some success. So for me, that was an evolution because I was still helping them with the same style of problem, but I was helping at a deeper level, a further along level. So when you're having this desire to burn everything to ground, when you're having this moment where everything's frustrating, everything is annoying and it feels uncomfortable, that friction, that kind of that frustration is a symbol of growth, right? When we're growing our comfort zone, it's uncomfortable, right? It can't be comfortable because we're trying to come out of our comfort zone. So recognizing that actually the symptoms just mean that we are evolving, we are growing, but taking that pause, taking that moment to diagnose what's really happening and what really needs to happen next, so that the decisions that we are making don't cause us bigger problems down the line. If you burn it to the ground, if you start again, you are creating that inconsistency within your business that takes you back, all the way back to step 1. And we don't want to do that, especially as when you're no longer in the beginning. When you are in the beginning, your fear of failure is, oh, it's okay, like I'll fail, but I'll learn and I can experiment and it's okay because I've really got nothing to lose at this point. But once you've built a certain amount, you do have something to lose. And the fear of losing that and the fear of breaking that can keep you really stuck. And it can create this friction, it can create this, I just need to get rid of it, I just need to start again. Because starting is easier than evolving. But evolving is so necessary if you want to reach the heights that you desire. So, before you burn it down, take a breath, do the universal IT, turn it off, turn it back on again. And then with a step back and with an objective eye, really look at what is going on for yourself. Give yourself that chance before you just burn it to the ground. Now, this is something I talk about in the next episode, which is coming out next week with Washington Ali. He has been through so many evolutions himself, and this is absolutely something that we talk about. This podcast is a window into the conversations I have every week with the leaders I work with. If you want to be inside that conversation, not just observing it, you will find the Actual Results Club and my one-to-one work linked below.